Welcome to Learn with Mr. Lewis. I'm, of course, Mr. Lewis. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about Today in History and how I got started doing Today in History with my students. It all started, I believe it was 2018. It might have been 2017, but I'm pretty sure it was 2018. So spring of 2018, I just had this thought. So I'd been for years, I have been getting in my email inbox from history.com their This Day in History thing that they sent out every day. And then you can go and look at different events that happened on that particular day in history. And it was always interesting to me. And in the spring of 2018, I just thought, you know what? I wonder if the kids would like this. So I looked at it and I was hoping there would be an easy way to do it. And I couldn't really find an easy way that I liked. So I decided, you know what? I'll take some of these events and some other events that I come across, and I'll make a little PowerPoint that they can look at on their way as they come into class. I didn't have any assignment associated with it. It was just about 6 or 7 events per day. And I would try to make them, and I made them for the rest of the school year that year. And the kids were really into it. There were a number of kids, they would come into class as quickly as possible and watch the PowerPoint scroll through and read the events and ask me questions about them. And so it got me thinking. So I'd never been very successful with warm-up activities. Not that I didn't see the value of them, it just seemed like it was so much extra work to put them together for not enough benefit. But I had this thought, hey, maybe this Today in History thing is the way to go to have an effective warm-up activity. And so I worked on it that summer, and I worked on it a lot to try to get it put together. Now, to start with, again, I started small, like 6 or 7 events. I came up with a handout that I changed more than once that school year. And I liked it. The kids liked it. It was great to have the kids come in and have a consistent, similar thing for them to do every day as a warm-up. They knew what to expect. They could get started on it right away. They didn't have to read a bunch of instructions each time because they knew exactly what they needed to do. And all they had to do is look at the new events for that day and pick one and tell me why they thought it was interesting. And then over time, it evolved. Okay, it evolved. I started adding some current events as interesting things were happening. I'd throw an event from that, that had happened the day before onto there. And I found that the kids were even more interested oftentimes in those current events than they even were in the events from the past. And so then it evolved into something that it is now, where for most of the days I've got at least 20, sometimes 30 different events. A lot of those are events that have happened in the last few years. And then I got to thinking there was an event on there that had to do with music, and I thought, ooh, I should play the music that's related to that. So I went on my Spotify account and I pulled it up on my school computer, and I have an amazing stereo system. Okay, I mean, this thing is state of the art. The speakers I purchased from a friend's dad in high school, and they were already old. So these speakers are from probably about 1980. They're epic. And then I have this really old stereo receiver, and it died. And then I had to buy a new one, but that was still more than 20 years ago. And it was the cheapest knockoff, no-name brand one I could find at Best Buy, because those were back in our poor days. Anyway, that's my stereo system. It actually, in my room, acoustics are great, so it sounds really good. But anyway, so then I started playing music that related to it. And I had already played a lot of music in my classroom. That was already a thing that I did. I even had some theme days back in the day, like, You Tuesday or Tay Tuesday or Weezer Wednesday or whatever, Mozart Monday. These were some of the things I used to do. But then I switched to having the music tied directly to the events of that day. So those are the Spotify playlists. There's one for every one of the Today in History slideshows. Okay, so remember, like and subscribe, greatly appreciated by me. It will really help the channel. Please do that. Let's now get into this week's Today in History. So September 25th, that's Monday, September 25th. We go all the way back to 1957. And of course, 1957 was when the Little Rock Nine, these 9 black students in Little Rock, Arkansas, attend what had been an all-white high school. This, of course, changes because of the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, but this is the real first test in the South. And it looked like it was going to go really well to start with, but they ran into a number of obstacles, including irate protesters out front. To me, it's one of the most interesting events of the civil rights movement, and one that I love to do with my students. There's an excellent movie about it called The Ernest Green Story. I'll put a link in the description if you'd like to watch it. It's available on YouTube. It's an amazing, amazing movie. I'd love if anyone's seen this movie, go ahead and comment, or once you do see it, because I know you all will, because you care about history. It's a great movie. It was done by the Disney Channel, of all things, back in the 1990s. Totally worth your time. It's very true to history. It's not perfect, no movie is, but Ernest Green himself is the narrator, and it stars some civil rights actors, some actors that were big in the civil rights movement, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, who happen to be married, and there's some great inside jokes in the movie between them, because they don't play married characters, but they make jokes once in a while that you can tell that these two are married, and if you know the joke, it's funny. At least it is for me. Okay. Moving along, Tuesday, September 26th, we go back to 2017 for this one, and yes, Saudi Arabia finally decides to let women drive. I'd love to say this is a major breakthrough in civil rights or in women's rights in Saudi Arabia. I mean, it is important. It's a step in the right direction, but as we know, Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, still has some serious issues when it comes to women's rights. The guardianship laws there are horrible, where women basically, there's a man in their life who gets to make all the big decisions for them. And so this is a country that I guess lifting this ban is moving in the right direction, and we hope to see more change when it comes to women's rights in Saudi Arabia. Let's see, Wednesday, September 27th, we go to 1986. And this is the movie Ferris Bueller helps make the Beatles' Twist and Shout popular again. And it's a big part of this Beatles revival that really happens in the 1980s. And maybe some of that is just in my own head. I think historically that is the case, and this is evidence of that. Some of that is my own personal budding love for the Beatles that happened in the 1980s. And the movie Ferris Bueller played a role in that, both for me personally and for the world, as Ferris Bueller performs on the Chicago parade float and lip syncs to Twist and Shout. He also does, of course, Wayne Newton's Danke Schoen, but we all know that Twist and Shout is superior to Danke Schoen. Come on, people. If you disagree with me, feel free to comment, but please, we're not even going there. Now, one thing some people may not know about the Beatles' Twist and Shout is this was not a song written by Lennon McCartney. This was a cover of an earlier song. So it's not one of their original works that they wrote, but their performance of it, of course, is the quintessential Twist and Shout. Yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to think about the Beatles, about Twist and Shout, and especially what's your favorite 80s teen movie? I mean, to me, it's Ferris Bueller, and it's not close, but maybe you have one that you prefer. You're wrong, but maybe you do. I'd love a comment. All right, moving on to Thursday, September 28th. So, 1918. This is when Private Henry Tandy, one of the most decorated soldiers from World War I, apparently allowed Adolf Hitler to live. Now, it's a wounded man. It's near the end of the war. It's just a few weeks from the end of the war. It's understandable that Private Tandy would decide not to shoot this unarmed man in the middle of no man's land. Turns out that this man was probably Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler certainly believed that was the case. Is the story true? I put it on the probably to likely area. Hitler, in 1938, this is where this all kind of happens. It's 20 years later. 1938, the infamous Munich conference, when British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain is in Germany meeting with Hitler, trying to come up with a a way out of what looked like was going to be the next world war. And Chamberlain basically sells his soul and whatever. I don't even want to talk about him holding up the paper when he comes back. I am going to. I have here the document signed by the German Chancellor. Yeah, whatever, Chamberlain. Sometimes you got to do what's not popular, but what's right as a leader. And Chamberlain wasn't willing to do that. But that's a whole other thing. So anyway, Hitler, so he's there, Chamberlain's there, and he sees this painting on the wall. It's this painting by Fortunino Matania, and it's a painting that shows a soldier in the foreground carrying another soldier, and that soldier in the foreground is supposed to be this Private Henry Tandy. Anyway, Hitler points that, he says, yeah, that man spared my life in 1918. And he tells this story. And so then this, of course, the press gets back to Henry Tandy, who had become somewhat famous because of all of his decorations in World War I, this heroic acts that he did, in particular at the Battle of Ypres. Love saying those French battle names, Ypres. Anyway, so Tandy is approached by the media, and at first he's kind of like, oh, I don't know. I did have some situations like that in the war. I don't remember this particular episode really well, but I wouldn't be surprised, I guess. Maybe that is what happened, but Hitler was 100% confident that that was the case. Anyway, later on, as Tandy thought about it more, he was pretty sure that he had done this and that the stories lined up, and lamented the fact that he could have prevented World War II. So did it happen actually? Yeah, probably. All right, so here we go. Let's move on now to Friday, September 29th. This is 1982, and we're looking at the Tylenol cyanide issue. And I remember this as a kid. I was pretty little at the time. I would have been 7 years old, almost 8 years old when this happened. And it was a big news story that I remember being concerned about as a little kid. And of course, it was something to be concerned about. This all happened in the Chicago area. All of the 7 people that died were in this one area. The culprit was never caught. They never did figure out who it was. It did lead to, awesomely, some copycat situations. And fortunately, most of these copycat things were false alarms. But I guess most importantly, it leads to safety measures. I mean, we're used to, when we open any medication, there being the safety seal and all that, and not just medication, like our orange juice, our a jar of peanuts, whatever it is, we have these safety measures to prevent that sort of thing from happening in the future. But it's a tragic situation. 3 of the victims were from the same family. There was a man who took the extra strength Tylenol. They didn't know that this was what it was at the time. He took this extra strength Tylenol. He became very ill. He was taken to the hospital. His brother and wife go to visit him in the hospital, and then they go back to that man's house, and the Tylenol bottle, they both had headaches, understandably, with the family member in the hospital, so then they take the Tylenol, and so it was just a tragic situation. Anyway, like and subscribe, comment, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Learn with Mr. Lewis. See ya.